In this video, we will walk you through the steps on how to install the BigFoot dust shoe and LED halo to your smart bench. Before we begin, ensure that your spindle cage is raised to the top of the Z head and that the spindle has been removed. Then, remove the Z head from your smart bench and set it down on a secure surface. You will need a 2mm hex driver, a 2.5mm hex driver, a 3mm hex driver, tweezers, long nose pliers, and a flathead screwdriver. Using a 3mm hex driver, remove and discard the 4 top plate bolts, as you will no longer need these. Then, remove the top cover plate and 4 spacers. You will need these later. Remove the extraction elbow and O-ring using a 3mm hex driver. Then unplug and remove the probe plate. Remove the 4 bolts holding the Z head motor in place using a 2.5mm hex driver, and then remove the belt. Once this has been removed, you may rest the motor on top of the Z head, ready to remove the rear cover. If, like me, you didn't fully remove the bolts and washers here, ensure you do so before the next step. In order to remove the cover, you first need to remove the 2 bolts shown here using your 2.5mm hex driver. Then, using a 2mm hex driver, you can remove the 8 bolts on either side of the Z head. You are now ready to remove the rear electronics cover. Be aware of your Z motor during this process so that you don't catch it accidentally. Flex the cover outwards slightly as you pull it slowly back towards you. Once removed, you will see 2 acrylic spacers, one each side, which you can now also remove. With the electronics exposed, you can now loosely secure the Z-axis motor to the top plate using 2 bolts to ensure it is not knocked during the rest of this procedure. Next, unplug the dust shoe loom from the existing dust shoe. This is located on the left-hand side of the extraction port, on the underside of the Z head. To gain access to the bolts holding the dust shoe in place, you will first need to slide up the side windows on the Z head. You will need to bend the windows slightly in the middle as you pull, in order to clear the lead screws. Now you are ready to remove the standard dust shoe. First, position the Z head so that it's resting on its side. This is important to prevent the Z head from falling over when the dust shoe is unbolted. Then, remove the 4 bolts holding the dust shoe in place. These are easily identified by following along the dust shoe spacers. Now place your Z head upside down. Remove the dust shoe loom from its strain relief by pushing the strain relief through the bottom Z head plate and sliding it off the loom. You can then feed the loom back through to the Z head electronics, ready for the next step. Before beginning this process, we advise you to place your BigFoot upside down on a flat surface. Take 2 of the supplied dome head screws and thread them through the holes shown using your 2.5mm hex driver. This will ensure the plates are aligned, making installing the Z head later much easier. Plug the original dust shoe loom into the socket of the splitter loom. Feed one end of the supplied splitter loom through the strain relief hole in the Z head base plate as shown. Either end of the loom can be used as it's designed to be reversible. Ensure the connector points to the front of the Z head as shown. You will need to note your Z head serial number at this stage, as it will be covered by BigFoot once installed. Lower the dust shoe into place and feed the loom through the hole into the dust shoe. Take your 2.5mm hex driver and partially thread the 2 bolts you positioned before into the receiving holes in the Z head base plate. It is recommended to use a long hex driver and access the bolt heads through these convenient holes here. Now install the other 2 bolts and tighten all 4 to secure BigFoot in place. Plug the halo splitter loom into the PCB in your dust shoe. You may find it helpful to use a pair of long needle nose pliers or similar to do this. You can now flip your Z heads back over into normal orientation. Fit the strain relief clip onto the splitter loom from the top of the Z head base plate. You may need to push this rubber grommet out of the way in order to access the base plate. Gently pull on the loom to remove any slack in the dust shoe, then slide the strain relief down and push it into the hole in the Z head base plate. Remove the strain relief clip from the Z Head motor plate by pushing from the underside. Feed the free end of the splitter loom through the hole in the Z Head motor plate, ensuring that the connector points towards the front of the Z Head as shown. Slide the loom into the slot of the strain relief clip with the flange facing the connector and pull the loom through until there is roughly 35mm exposed. Push the strain relief clip back into the Z Head motor plate so that the flange is sitting snug against the top of the plate. Route the loom tidally with the rest of the looms to prepare to refit the rear cover. Now we can reassemble your Z Head. First, in order to refit your rear cover, you'll need to once again position your Z-axis motor on top of the Z Head top plate and refit the acrylic spacers. With the spacers in place, you can now reinstall your rear electronics cover. You will need to apply the cover from an angle in order to avoid the BigFoot extraction port and gently flex as before. Using a 2mm hex driver, reinstall the acrylic inserts. You can now slide your acrylic windows back down into place. Then secure the cover by refitting the 2 bolts to the top of the Z Head, shown here. Finally, it's time to refit your Z motor. Using the 2.5mm hex driver, loosely thread the 4 bolts with washers into the Z Head plate, taking care to support the Z motor as you do so. Once loosely secured, you can refit your motor belt just like this. Gently pull your Z motor so that the belt is tight, then tighten the motor bolts. Using a 3mm hex driver, fit the lower and upper parts of the acrylic rear cover plate onto your Z Head, where your original dust chute elbow was. Then fix them in place with 2 of the supplied bolts. First, plug the loom into the Halo PCB diffuser. Then, place the top cover plate on top of the Halo PCB diffuser and insert 2 dome socket bolts at the front of the assembly using a 3mm hex driver. Take your spacers and loosely thread these bolts onto the Z Head top plate. Do not tighten the bolts until later, when all 4 spacers are in place. You are now ready to install your hose holder. To begin, line up the holes on the hose holder with the holes on the top plate of the Z Head. Thread the supplied holder bolts through the aligned holes and remaining spacers and tighten using your 3mm hex driver. Now you can fit your extraction hose. Your hose will come with reducer and jubilee clip already attached. Be sure to remove these before the first step. Feed your extraction tubing through the grommet. Make sure you feed through enough length so that you have some excess hose to play with. This can be made easier by turning the hose as you feed it through. Now that the hose is through the grommet, slide the large jubilee clip onto your hose. Next, connect the extraction tubing to the reducer assembly, ensuring that it goes on far enough to be flush with the rim as shown. This is a snug fit, so it may take some twisting and wiggling. Once fitted, tighten the jubilee clip using a flathead screwdriver. Attach the coupler and hose assembly to BigFoot by pushing it down and on. When fitting, you will need to ensure that the earthing wire, the blue wire attached to your extraction tubing, is situated on the right side of your rear electronics cover. Push down all the way and then tighten using the remaining 2 jubilee clips. Finally, you will need to earth the extraction hose on both ends. To do this, secure the blue earthing wire onto the Z Head bottom plate with a supplied bolt using a 3mm hex driver. You will need to refer to your specific extraction system setup for advice on how to best earth the hose from the extraction end.